Thank you. The Special School District of St. Louis County's Board of Education June work study is now called to order. Will all who are able please rise for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a roll call?
Director Nelson.
Here.
Director Weaver.
Here.
Director Sartorius.
Here.
Director Sue.
Here.
Vice President Cuneo.
Here.
President Staton.
Here.
Director Asner.
Quorum being present, welcome on to the work study. Proceed with tonight's agenda, Dr. Mason.
Great, thank you. Tonight, we're going to start with Dr. Bolton and Jennifer Henry and Alex Dexenheimer?
Dexheimer.
Okay. I will do some push-ups for that, right? Dexheimer will be leading us with our panorama education tonight regarding the spring climate survey results. And then after that, Dr. Bolton and Alan Week will be going into our workload case. Turn it over to Dr. Bolton.
Good evening, President Staton, Board of Education. I'm Jennifer Henry, the Chief Communications Officer for the district. And tonight we have Dr. Bolton, Chief of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability, and our guest presenter from Panorama to talk about our survey data from our student survey, our climate survey of our staff, and then our overall community survey. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dexheimer.
Thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay. Okay. Excellent. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for inviting us out to share a little bit about those spring survey results. So just a little overview of the time that we have. First of all, a little introduction of me. I'm Alex Dexheimer, Professional Learning Director on our Teaching and Learning team at Panorama. I'm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where I got my start as an educator in the elementary special education space in both Minneapolis as well as St. Paul Public Schools before eventually joining the team here at Panorama. And I just want to, again, thank you for inviting me on this evening, but also thank you for being part of our broader Panorama community, which serves millions and millions of students every single year all across the country. So thank you all so much for your partnership. A little overview of how we sort of structured the next hour or so together. We'll start by doing, I'll share kind of a data overview with some key insights from a few of the different surveys that have been administered this year. Just looking at some high level takeaways and insights. And then part two here, we're actually going to invite all of you to log into Panorama yourself and explore the data on your own. And then at the end, as you can see behind me, we have some post-it notes here where we're going to invite you to share what you're noticing, what you're curious about, what questions you have, where you're noticing strengths and things like that. So our hope is this is very interactive. So if you have questions, feel free to share them, but we'll also hopefully reserve some time at the end for questions as well. So just some context for some of the survey data that we'll be looking at tonight. First, I want to highlight how survey representation and historical participation. So our survey is sort of broken up into 4 different pieces here. We'll have survey data for grades 3 through 5, survey data is for grades 6 through 12, survey data is from employees, which include staff, paras, and teachers, and then family survey data as well. And you can see here sort of the number of responses that we have gathered over the past year and a half or so. On this chart, you can see that the family survey is part of a winter survey administration, whereas the student and staff survey administration happens in the fall as well as the spring every single year. So just a little bit about how the survey results are reported out here at Panorama. Most of our survey questions have 5 answer choices, and 2 of those answer choices are specifically designated as favorable responses to a specific question. So in this example here, how many of your teachers are respectful toward you? Those 2 answer choices that are research-based to be favorable responses to that question. All of my teachers and most of my teachers, I can see that 48% and 38% of students responded with one of those 2 answer choices. So if we combine those 2 percentages together, we get an 86% favorable response to that specific question. We'll be exploring different topics that have been measured, and all of the topics that we measure here through the survey have multiple questions sort of within them. So these question scores sort of trickle up to inform what the overall topic score is for a specific survey topic. Also want to share before we get too much into the data, when we're looking at change over time, as well as, longitudinal and historical data, what constitutes a significant change? And that's really based upon how many respondents that we heard from. So that's why I wanted to highlight, how many folks have we been hearing from over the years? Because when we're looking at change over time, it really will depend on that N size, or like how many folks we're hearing from in terms of what percent change in that favorable response would be considered statistically significant. And our researchers at Panorama put together this really nice chart that can sort of guide us when we're looking at these longitudinal data pieces around what would be considered a significant change between survey administrations. So again, depending on what lens you're looking at, what survey you're looking at, referring back to this can be helpful when thinking about change over time. All right, so with that sort of framing, I do want to transition just to sharing some high level insights to what we saw from the past survey administration, that Culture and Climate Survey Administration. So starting with grades 3 through 5, one of the strengths that we noticed from the spring survey administration was specifically for the topic called school climate. Overall, the percent favorable for that overall topic for grades 3 through 5 across partner districts was 54% favorable. You can also see a breakdown here by grade level. So noticing the most favorable responses coming from our students in the 4th grade at a 58% favorable response rate to the topic of school climate, and our least favorable responses coming from 5th graders at a 48% favorable rate. So students responded 6 points more favorably to this topic compared to a year ago in the spring 2024 survey administration, with the most favorable responses to the question you see below there about their mood at school. And we can see with that specific question that was the spring 2025 survey administration was 10 points more favorable compared to the spring of 2024, and 6 points more favorable compared to the fall 2024. And with this specific question, you can also see a little table here to see how different grade levels responded to that specific question. Again, with our most favorable responses to that question being for our 4th graders and least favorable being for our 5th graders. Yes.
I know we'll do questions later, but just for now, are these just SSD only sites, or are these partner districts as well?
Partner districts. This is.
Both.
Thank you.
As I'm just talking about this, there's a column here that's labeled SSD of St. Louis, Missouri, and there's some numbers beneath it. What do those numbers represent?
Down here on the bottom right here. Yeah, so that is for this specific question that I highlighted. So this question, how positive or negative is the mood at your school? Overall, across grades 3 through 5, across partner districts, students responded at 67% favorable to that specific question. And then this chart just to the right of that is showing the breakdown to that question by grade level.
That is a percentage. That's what
Percent favorable.
So 64%, 74%, 64%.
Right. So for example, 3rd graders responded at a 64% favorable rate to that specific question. Yeah.
Do you have the numbers for how many respondents we have?
Yes, so that was back on slide, I can zip back here. Back on slide, I don't remember the slide number exactly, but for the spring of 2025, we heard from 236 third through fifth graders. Last question.
And so there are more than one question that's being weighted into this topic.
Correct.
This is just an example.
Yeah, just an example. I pulled that one specifically out because it is where we were seeing the most favorable responses to that question, as well as noticing pretty significant growth for that specific question from both the fall, this previous fall, as well as 1 year ago in the spring.
And you
Yes.
did say this is partnering districts and not just SSDs.
Correct, yep, yep.
So maybe nitpicky here, since you provide us a breakdown by grade, but not a breakdown by grade for the number of respondents. Is it about equal for all the respondents, 256 through fifth graders, or is it?
I believe so, but we can, when we get to the part where we're looking specifically in the platform, I can highlight where you can see those specific numbers by grade level. Yeah.
And also, are you able to highlight the SSD students as well?
Yes, there is a part in the platform itself that you can just look specifically at that if you would like. Okay, one of the topics that we're noticing an opportunity for potential opportunity for growth for grades 3 through 5 was around teacher-student relationships, the topic of teacher-student relationships. So with this, the overall percent favorable for the spring survey administration was 67% favorable. That puts that is in the 20th percentile compared to the national data set that we have. With this, we're noticing a consistent decrease in favorable responses to this topic, with the least favorable responses to the question about teachers wanting to know, or students, teachers wanting to know how students feel. So the question that you can see here is specifically asking, when your teacher asks, "How are you?" how often do you feel they really want to know your answer? That specific question had a 64% favorable response rate. And again, we can see a breakdown here by grade level with the least favorable responses to that specific question coming from our third graders and the most favorable coming from our fourth graders. All right, transitioning now into grades 6 through 12. Where we're noticing a really good and a really positive, really good strength is in the topic of teacher-student relationships for grades 6 through 12. So kind of the inverse of what we're noticing for grades 3 through 5. So for this specific topic, students responded at a 66% favorable response rate, putting us in the 60th percentile nationally. But one of the things that you can do, and I can show you how to do that when we get into the platform itself, is that you can also compare specifically to middle schools or specifically to high schools. So when we toggle this on and look at how does this compare to just middle schools or just high schools, that actually puts us in the mid to upper 80th percentile compared to others nationally. So they're noticing quite a bit of strength there. Also wanted to list that all of the questions that make up this topic of teacher-student relationships for grades 6 through 12 noticed growth from the fall. You can sort of see that in that screenshot here. Students responded most favorably to the question about teachers being respectful. And the largest increase since the fall of 2024 in questions about teachers being concerned for upset students and teachers really wanting to know how students are feeling. One of the potential opportunities for growth that we noticed for grades 6 through 12 was around the topic of school safety. School safety was the only topic that saw a decrease in favorable responses from the fall of 2024, with 1 point less favorable overall in the spring here compared to the fall. However, there is growth from spring of 2024. So if you look at 1 year ago, the topic overall is 3 points more favorable. Overall national comparison is in the 60th percentile. And again, if we compare specifically to middle schools, we're in the 80th percentile compared to those nationally, specifically to high schools in the 70th percentile compared to others nationally. The least favorable responses within this topic came about the question about disrespect, with a significant response gap between male and female students. However, again, this topic saw an increase, this question saw an increase compared to the fall of 2024. Yes,
Is that across all grade levels on this or?
this is just grades 6 through 12. Yep. Yes.
Is there some way to look at the variance between the numbers of students who responded, which was 1,119 in 2024, and the number of students that responded in 2025, which was 623? Is there some kind of variance there in the data that says, well, this was a much larger group,
Mhm.
so we may have gotten one response that a smaller group would have lowered our response or made our response higher even? That the differentiation, just kind of wondering how that's addressed.
Yeah, sometimes we notice differences with different sizes of responses. So like if one year we had 600 responses and the next survey we had 1,000. Sometimes there is some differences that can sort of creep out of that. I wouldn't say there's anything like hard and fast that we're like, we always notice this when response rates go up, or we always notice this when response rates go
And you
down.
do have more historical numbers
Right.
there too, which
Yep.
would help, but
Yeah,
just looking at those two variances,
Mhm.
because it's so large,
right.
the numbers participating, it's just.
Yeah.
I don't want those things, I was wondering.
Yeah, and that's really a really good observation. Keep that in mind, as you're looking at this, and when you get in there, you'd be able to hover over this and see how many students responded longitudinally.
Right.
And are there anything you're noticing between like, oh, this is when we saw a high number and this is where a high number of responses and this is what it looks like, and low number. Yeah, so that's definitely a great noticing, and we do notice some differences there. And when we get into the platform, we just I invite you to explore that. All right, going to keep us moving now and look at some of the employee survey data that we have available to us here. The first area where we're noticing a strength is in the topic of well-being. So this specific survey for employees is broken up for paras at the top here, staff in the middle, and then teachers on the bottom. Noticing a strong overall favorable response rates to the topic of employee well-being. Paras specifically responding most favorable overall, with their responses putting them near the 80th percentile compared to others nationally. The most favorable question for all groups was, how much does your work matter to you? And all three of these groups, paras, staff, as well as teachers, responded all at or above 96% favorable to the question, how much does your work matter to you? For the topic of professional learning, we're noticing some of the least favorable employee responses for this topic. And for the topic of professional learning and feedback and coaching, however, all groups responding more favorably compared to the spring of 2024. So looking 1 year ago. The least favorable question for all three of these groups was, how much do you learn from the evaluation processes at your school? All three of these groups responding less than or equal to 38% favorable to that specific question. Finally, we're going to be looking at some family insights here. So one of the topics that we're noticing strength is around communications. So noticing overall favorability remaining steady from the winter of 2024 to the winter of 2025. That's the survey window specifically for family members. We're noticing significant growth and most favorable responses in questions about understandable data from the school and regular communication. Most favorable responses coming from families in 1st, 6th, and 11th grade. And over here, you can sort of see for the topic overall of communications, this sort of graph or chart you see over on the right here is how did each grade level respond to that topic overall. And you can see there is some variance there. Just by nature of how the survey is structured, there are specific questions for those students in the Career and Tech Ed programs. So for students at North Tech and South Tech, but this is also an area of strength is that topic of communications. So we're noticing strong growth from the winter of 2024 with pretty close parity between those two high schools there with favorable responses. Potential opportunity for growth is around school climate, where we're noticing a significant decrease in overall favorable responses. Both questions that make up the topic saw decreases from the winter of 2024. And we're also noticing some significant gaps by grade level, with the least favorable responses coming from fourth grade families.
Were third and fifth grade intentionally omitted?
They were not. So one thing you may notice here is at the very bottom, there's a bit that says, yeah, it's kind of tucked away at their bottom. It's called confidentiality protected. So just how the survey reports out, if the number of respondents is fewer than 5, their specific demographic identity is protected. Just because if the N number is so small, you would be able to quickly identify like what student or students gave that specific response. So with this survey administration from the spring, what this is telling me is that we heard from fewer than 5 families who have 5th or 3rd grade students. So they are combined to protect their confidentiality there. And you may come across that because there's other demographic data that is available to you here. You may come across that with some of the other demographic data as well. One of the topics that's specific to the career and tech ed schools is just titled Career and Tech Ed. So did notice a significant decrease in favorable responses to the CTE topic, with significant gaps between grade levels, with 10th grade responding least favorably. So families of 10th graders responding least favorably. Questions about school partnerships and program completion requirements saw the least favorable responses and largest decreases from the winter of 2024 survey there. So this chart up at the top is showing the breakdown for the overall topic. And noticing 10th grade was least favorable, 11th grade was most favorable. All right, so with that, I do want to transition us into allowing you all to explore the data yourselves. So what we want to do now is invite folks to go ahead and log in to the Panorama platform. You can see the link up here on the screen, the secure.panoramaed.com. You can navigate there. Molly's going to be and Jen are going to be around to help folks log in. But when you do get to that website, you should just be able to click sign in with Google, and that will take you to where you need to be for the next part of our presentation. Here.
Let me log in first. So. Here. Should have used on before. Absolutely.
All right, once everyone gets logged in, I'll just do a little bit of a demo up here to get you situated and exploring the data.
Yes.
All right, I think everyone is either logged in or really close to getting logged in. So I'm going to keep us moving here. So one thing I want to highlight before doing a bit of a demo just to get you situated on how to access different parts of the data is, I know this is maybe the first time logging in for a lot of folks. So one of the things that we like to highlight when we're first doing any sort of data analysis or data inquiry is this mental model called the ladder of imprints. So this is sort of a process that's happening within us day in and day out, whether we're conscious of it or not, where we're sort of collecting information around us and then making our way up this ladder to finally take action based on any of the data that we're looking at. So we're gonna have probably close to 10 minutes or so here to explore on your own coming up in just a little bit. And as you're exploring, do invite you to really practice staying low on this ladder of interest for sort of this first time going through the data, really staying in that collecting data, filtering data range, jotting down your noticings and wonderings before more slowly starting to make your way up this ladder and starting to think about any of the actions or decisions you're thinking about taking. We're going to have some opportunity towards the end of our session here to sort of share out and talk with each other what you're noticing and what are you thinking about. But as you're initially exploring, do invite you to practice staying low on that ladder of inference. All right, so when folks first logged in, you should have come to a page that looks a little something like this. This is your survey dashboard. There are a lot of different directions where you can go. This first blue button over on the far left here will show you sort of data for all partner districts. If you are interested in one specific district, this next blue button here would allow you to select a specific district to look at their specific data. Just for purposes of demonstration, I'm going to stay at a very high level looking at all partnership districts by clicking this blue button here. Might zoom in just a touch so it's easier for us to see. So this is where you can start exploring your survey data. It defaults you to the student level data. This is where you'll find that student level data that we highlighted a little bit ago. So we have survey topics around different competencies for grades 3 through 5 here. Scrolling down a little bit further, you'll see that same data for grades 6 through 12. And then we can see the climate survey data is specifically a little bit lower with grades 3 through 5 here. And then 6 through 12 just below that. Yes.
I do have a quick question about like the format. Is this only Likert scale or like, do you have like open response options?
Yeah, there is the ability to answer or ask free response questions. I actually think there are some of those here. So like this is an example here where it's please share anything else you would like to ask about about these questions. So there is the ability to ask free response questions, but most of the research-based survey instruments that we have, most of them have 5 answer choices that students select from.
And when we're talking about the students who took this, I'm guessing that our deaf, hard of hearing students, they also took this. Is that right?
That is correct.
And were they, was it an interpreter signing this, or were they?
They needed to do this.
Okay,
They were provided accommodations, there were accommodations that they might.
Okay.
To participate.
okay, correct, thank you.
So one of the things I want to highlight, because I know I did share staff survey or employee survey data as well as family survey data. So the teachers and staff and para survey data, there's a little tab up here at the top that's titled teachers and staff. So if you navigate to that, that is where you'll see the survey data for paras and then for staff, as well as finally for teachers. And you'll notice with those that there are several free response questions that are involved with those surveys as well. If you're specifically looking for the family survey, that happens during it's under a winter survey. So up here on the top right, you can see it defaults you to spring of 2025. If you do want to access any of that family survey data, you would want to navigate to the winter of 2025 option here. And that would bring you to the family specific survey that we were talking about just a little bit.
So I'm gonna interrupt.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
One other thing I want to add is for students who need visual supports for the reading, we have created Board Maker. Panorama allows us to take our questions and do it in Board Maker. So we do have those available for teachers and students who need that symbol support. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's just.
Just sort of one last thing I want to share before getting out of your way and allowing you to look at all this data is, so you're looking at sort of topic level overviews here, right? Where, for example, teacher-student relationships for grades 3 through 5, we can see the overall percent favorable, how does that compare to others nationally? changed since the previous survey administration. But for any one of these topics, you can click on Explore to sort of dive in a little bit deeper to that specific topic. So you can see that longitudinal data here, a little bit of an option to start to manipulate some of our national data to get closer to an apples to apples comparison with school level, free reduced price lunch percentage, things like that. You can explore how did different demographic groups respond to this data. So some of that I shared around gender and grade level. And then at the bottom, you'll see the individual questions that make up that broader topic and how did students respond to each of those as well.
So there'll be a way for us to see the end number, the number of respondents.
Yeah, so quick thing you can do if you're here, back on your topic page is right underneath where it says grade, it'll show you how many respondents there were. And then next to it, there's also the ability to click show breakdown, where you can see how many students from certain demographic groups did we hear from as well
Yeah,
here.
I'm sure that's the thing. Thanks. So the reason I'm asking is because you mentioned the confidential.
Mhm.
The confidential, you said less than 5 families responded to each. So if that's for third, fifth grade, that means presumably the number of responses is less than 10 for those two groups combined.
Yes,
But we can't get to 93%, if that's the right, there's no way to get there. It would have to, even, I mean, if one person says no, it would have to be a number lower than 90%. 90% or lower. So there's no way to get, in other words, I'd like to see the end, just so I can understand, how percentages are arrived at.
let me come over and just talk to you a little bit more. I just want to let folks start exploring on their own here, just for the sake of
Is there a
time.
way? Well, the end's important to me, but I'd like to know what percentage of that, these are the small ones, I'd like to see. Percentage of the large end, in other words, if I have 5,000 families there,
Mhm.
and I have responses from 310. I'd like that, that's an important piece of information. I often wonder. What is the difference of the individuals that are responding to me versus the ones that are not? Maybe we can't figure that out, but. With the large number that don't respond, it really weakens what I'm looking at. And do you find that people that respond, is that a different pen or a different type than those who do respond?
Like a different type of family?
No, yeah, are the individuals who respond happier with SSD than not happy? I don't know how we get that information, but since the largest percentage don't respond,
Mhm.
I'd like to know how can I get to that?
I think we found anecdotally that people who respond to the surveys feel strongly one way or the other. So it's both ends of the spectrum. The people who are content in the middle are not the ones who really take the survey. They feel strongly one way or the other.
That's true, that would push to keep things always at the status quo, since the vast majority are not either happy or unhappy. So is that what you're saying? I'm trying to figure out when I have such a small percentage, is my sample size actually? Can I take from that sample size? The large thing, and
Extrapolate.
Dan, what I was looking at was the same kind of thing with the sample sizes. But I think what we need to look at is the trend,
okay,
because the trends change
Mhm.
from time of testing to time of testing.
Yeah.
So if you see a trend, that's what we want to look at. And then if the trend goes up or down, that would tell us, well, this is working or this is not working.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I was going with that other questioning.
I think that's a good point. You do have, especially for student facing data, there's a lot of longitudinal data there. I know the family survey, there's been 2 administrations, so, more to come there. But yeah, I love that point about looking sort of longitudinally and noticing, bigger trends.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to give you all 10 minutes to sort of practice and explore on your own. Jotting down some of your noticings, wonderings, areas of strength, opportunities for growth, things like that. And then when we come back together, we'll share out, what we're noticing about the survey data, and we'll be around to answer questions as well.
So seeing here, this is.
Yes.
These are really sad.
But I've seen this. You know, it's just like they sign it, it's less than five, I mean, the third grade, plus some back.
Okay, here's your count. All right.
So I know waiting for this.
If this is.
I don't know, switch it.
Like, just for example, they have to look for them, so that you say.
Yeah, one person. So.
Yeah.
That means so much. This is a back.
And also, this is where, we're looking, yeah, and also there are some particularities with like when the survey happens.
Yeah.
So oftentimes they give you goals to compare spring to spring
And zero.
falls and fall.
So.
Because we do notice there's changes in the school climate between fall and spring. So.
Have been higher than our.
Right, yes.
That's pretty.
And we notice that question is small. That's mostly.
So we've been talking about it, it's really, really what. Which is something that's.
Yes.
So I'm making an understanding of it. So I'm looking at the responses to the question. About school climate. And for this group here, with confidential protected, it's two groups. Each with less than 5 respondents. So less than 10 people on that service. I just don't see how we can get to So there's 10 of us, right, there's less than 10 responses. So if there's no way to get to 90% if one person.
No.
So percent favor, so
I'll give you an example. So if it's 1 out of 10, sorry, if it's 9 out of 10 respondents, so 0.2%.
so the,
And if it's 8 out of 9,
oh, sure,
that's, 89.
So-
No.
yeah,
So
so
it's a.
right, I got
I
it.
get it.
So it would be on 5 out of 10 years.
Well, no, it's just, you just can't get to 90%.
So I'll have to look into this, but it could be that there's some other group that's captured in there that's just not being labeled there. But that is something I had to talk to.
So is there any, this is and beyond the law? Because, if it's 100% of.
So sure.
11th grade, we have 6 sites, so 11th grade, that's the first one of the group.
So, yeah, so if you look back, we're doing it into this question. Yeah, that's
What is considered.
So here is your.
You know what I mean?
This is what it's.
Seven.
Seven.
Research shows.
Total.
Do you think,
Shared actual separation, just because I don't know it's section one.
I'm just wondering where that comes.
No problem, because I was trying to, that's the one number that I can.
Yeah, possibly, yeah, someone who will grab a person. Yeah.
Mail and everything. Responses to that one question about. School, yeah, and like. Is the, can we know what that means, like that specific.
It's just trying to figure out what's going on.
So sorry, so this, we're gonna get back. You did.
No.
And then it shows the national, where we're at, national building entirety of this section.
So you want a national comparison to, I guess, the graphic?
Well, for this, like, for the one question, was such a big between. The respect, I think that was. Does that, can we see what national average is? So the question is this a trend of the? You can go ahead and ask that question.
Oh, you want to know, I was just questioning compared.
Yeah.
We do have some students who are reporting. So my guess would be, yeah, maybe an opportunity to maybe sort some of that specific data. But right now, that's actually. It's on. But you can, on some of them, you can like break it up. And that data comes from education statistics, so it's like free use price lunch versus social as well, versus non-urban, so this is great lots. But. Questions. Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
So, yeah.
Significance here.
Right, yeah, so, yeah, depending on how many responses there's later.
That's what we're learning. Right.
But it's like individual question.
Well, but these are students.
Are there significant differences?
It was, looking at like all the response.
So like noticing. That is something to. That went down. 6 point increase in international.
And then we have other,
I think
right,
it's already
like, yeah, they like.
I always love starting with the close, right?
Those are shoes. It's not. Or it looks like it's. So we may want to.
That's not fair for us to go. We're not in the model. What's the? So. Way that you can, when you get on some of these, what the question was in some.
That was just one from our student information system. They included things that just what we sell them from our.
Especially. Yeah.
This would make much more sense. C application wide, that is. Why?
You know, they have.
If I add those two, at 38%, that one you're talking. That over read percentages.
I can imagine it's.
Do you know who student versus this is? You know.
So I just, the other word. Just so I could.
These should be fine. And an H would make it 8%. This would make more sense. 36 and 2 would make 38%, right? Then you'd have this thing as 58%. Right. That would make percent. That percentage would make it. This doesn't make sense. Not good.
We can do to that. Because that comes straight from our, that's what our.
Yeah, so I'm not, I'm just trying to figure out what it means. That's a great question.
Like, I knew.
Let's take 2 more minutes here and then we'll come back together. 2 more minutes.
Where is this information? Like on similar civility. Says subgroup with no data, 7%.
Research.
What is other health care? 2 years. I mean, I'm not sure I know what that means. And 2% are just it's. Kind of thing. You know, is that don't you just necessary? Okay, this would be, so it must be 7% now and disabled.
And that's almost like I'm trying to post exactly.
So somewhere we got it, yes.
We just have text.
Okay, so 5% for text was one of that. So now.
That's the paper you said.
That's the most wrong since 13. I'm just, no, I'm not, this is not my, I'm just getting fair with it. It's a bit, it's a other say it's like. What is? Where is it actually? Yeah. Yes, I was taking it, they're putting it. They just done the analysis. They can buy it, but they need some.
All right, I want to bring us back together here. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, hope you had a chance to sort of take that initial dive in, start pulling out some pieces of data that you found interesting, maybe some areas of strength, opportunities for growth and things like that. So what we want to do now is take the next 5 or 10 minutes or so for folks to share, like, what were you noticing when you were looking at the data yourself? So up here in front of me, we have 4 easel pads, big Post-it notes, whatever you decide to call them. One of them is, what are you noticing? One of them is, what are areas of strength? One of them is, what are opportunities for growth? And finally, what questions do you have? So everyone should have some Post-it notes in front of them. Invite you to jot down what you were noticing, those areas of strength, opportunities for growth, questions, and come on up, start populating these Post-it or easel pads here, and feel free to discuss with your colleagues as well what you were noticing with the data yourself. So we'll take 5 or 10 minutes here, and then we'll come back together and wrap things up.
Okay, what?
We've already done what they know.
Yes. Okay, so. That makes sense. So then if you combine those two, that makes that's 38%. That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, another one is the videos, the food, stage items, and so. But that's why, that's what. This is the same, just say it's fair. Jim. It's 2 to 1. Yeah. So does any who's responding? Says it was 6, so 6. Is that what happens in the basement? Okay, especially in the SSD. Is that because of the. Those are the questions that I'm interested in. The office was set. Okay. Yeah. That's it's supposed to be refreshing as what is it?
That's a little before.
I'm gonna say it is, I'm not saying it's the right thing for us, right, you actually vote. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
That's what you're calling.
It's like, you know. And one of the especially.
I don't wanna.
From schools. Well, yeah. What's that? You will see ED.
Yeah.
I gave it the things.
So these are like, most of the times. But that's not something. Well, it's also possible. So that's a question that we filled out itself. So all this is.
So
Yeah.
it's showing from the data, sorry, it's very low, so it's showing the everything, but.
So yeah, this specifically is. And I don't think they have to type this out. So here, this is a question that person taking the survey would have to type out their survey. I believe it's a question they can also say. So they can just. Yeah.
Question. The background question.
Yeah, so I just wanted to search and that was the first view that comes out.
So what, I'm sorry, so the question you had was, you want them to be a option that people select. Yeah.
You can break it down like student survey,
Yes. Yeah, I thought you were asking, like, when students are taking survey. Option. Yeah, perhaps they think a student was sitting out taking survey, they were, deaf hard of hearing, like, if it was, to select to. Survey. Like with someone talking, but, I'll look into that as well. Yes, yeah, right, yeah, yeah, because we always say any sort of accommodation, so yeah, they should have the same accommodation form. They're taking this. Yeah, I can ask our researchers, I can see what's the, make this. Research process for.
They'll make it up.
Quality evaluation, yeah, it's like, I don't know who else is.
Yes, I think they're, that's.
I will, I think somebody follow up on, so I'll send it. Yeah, thank you.
What's his face, his questions?
Okay. Oh, wait. Probably this.
All right, I'm gonna bring us back together here to wrap things up. So thank you for populating these. I'm gonna take pictures of these and bring them back to our team. I know that Molly is very interested in what you had to share here tonight as well. But just to wrap up, in terms of additional supports and things Panorama has available to really anyone who has access to this data across all member districts. We have our Panorama Academy, which is our collection of asynchronous resources, video tutorials, more information about the research behind Panorama, if that's something that you're interested in. So if you're ever coming back to Panorama Academy is always a great place to stop by and just type something out and see if we have a resource for it. More than likely we do. Also, we have available our Panorama Playbook, which is our professional learning library that includes over 900 different instructional strategies that educators have access to. It's free. Anything you find there is free, available for you all to utilize. A lot of great resources there around family engagement as well. I know that's a topic that we talked about quite a bit tonight. So hop on over to Playbook if you haven't, as well, just to see what's there, see what kind of resources are available to our educators across the schools. And with that, I know we have maybe just a couple minutes here. Are there any other lingering questions that didn't get captured up here, didn't get shared verbally before I hand it over to Molly?
The question is, what will the sum of this, how will the sum of this be shared with the board?
The sum of your questions and stuff, we'll type them up and give them to Tom, and we can share them out in the Friday packet.
Awesome, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm very curious with the AI. Is there a way to take the results that we're looking at, put it into an AI to say, can you do the analysis for us of what our strengths and weaknesses? Is that something you're working on? Is that something available?
Yeah, I did mention, I think it was to you, that we do have some sort of enhanced survey reporting options that are coming out relatively soon. So I'm not sure if that's exactly one of them, but I do know that it's something that we're very much thinking about. So
There's so
just
many different levels,
Yeah.
you know, with all the different grade levels, and
Mhm.
all the parents, the
Right.
staff, the I guess the teacher assistants and so forth. You have all of those different components
Mhm.
to take a look at that. You almost are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So to focus in one area and then pull it out,
Yeah.
to me makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I know we're doing a lot with AI and specifically with survey reporting. I'm just not sure when specific feature like
Just
that.
be careful with the footnote.
Yeah, sure. Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I know 10 minutes that you had explored tonight is definitely not enough time. So, invite you to keep exploring, staying low on that ladder and, jotting down your noticings and wonderings for sure.
Everyone.
All right, well, thank you all again so much for inviting me out. I really appreciate all the questions and engagement that you all had this evening. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Mom.
Sure. So just to wrap it up, these are available to our administrators as well as our teachers. They can get in and look at this data as well. Our administrators typically do review the data and as they're creating their action plans and their growth plans for the next year, things they're going to focus on. This is a data point that many of them do use to help identify some of those areas as well. Any other questions? Yes.
Can we use what I like it, I like to make sure that we're using it. Like, I was wondering, like, on something like this, I'd be very curious. If in fact. The thing is correct on our third to sixth grade, okay? When I looked at safety. That's when we had a drop off, okay. I also saw that we had. Males to females in sixth grade, we had twice as many males as females who answered the survey.
Mhm.
Can we use that data to look at programming then for safety? No, let's utilize this data.
Absolutely.
We've got it. I would like to use it.
So our operations, everybody has this. So yes, our safety and security would have this as well.
But can we make sure that people actually use it? I apologize, I'm not
No,
saying.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Was in
Yeah.
state government way too long. That, all we did was collect data, we didn't use it.
I do feel many of our folks are using this data as a data point.
That's good.
Yeah, I do feel that way. And I am sure, I will specifically talk with John and Eric and our safety and security as well, and make sure that they know how to access it and can take a look at that.
I thought, especially when we look at where some of the things that, because then we would look at. We're going to talk about safety, maybe we need to be working with males and females.
Sure.
If that's what it says here.
Sure.
I just want to make sure we're using the data.
I wouldn't just really make a quick comment too of how well it justifies what we're doing. We are looking at coaching for teachers.
Yeah.
And yes, we're below where we probably should be, but over the last few years, you can see how we've emphasized it and how it has
We're
increased
starting to.
tremendously, so yeah, it validates where we're focusing on in the growth we're making. So I really appreciate that, see that firsthand.
I know comments, that I didn't put up there, but I wanted to make. When we are, getting comparisons to other nationwide districts, can we get some information on the demographics of those districts? Is there any way to select for schools that have demographics similar to ours? Both in terms of, especially in terms of student population.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So-
There's not very many that are like us out there.
Or to select for students with IEPs as opposed
So-
to, I don't know if that, we can capture that.
Yeah, so the national comparison data that we have, the demographics data is available, it's pulled from the NCES, National Center for Education Statistics. So it looks at free reduced price lunch percentage, urban versus non-urban. And then free reduced, and then grade level, so elementary, middle, and high. So that's where we get the sort of national comparison data. And that's something that came up with, and someone else mentioning it as well, was can we see comparisons specifically for like individual questions or for like individual demographics? And currently it's not something that we have available. But a bigger breakdown of what districts make up our national comparison, I would have to get back to you. Look up.
Would it be possible if you're going to do that to factor with school districts with large numbers of IEPs? I would like to be able to compare apples to apples.
Yeah.
Efficacy question and stuff.
Yeah, that national research comparison data is not sort of my forte, so I'm not gonna speak out of turn on that, but I'll bring that back to our folks who are in charge of that and have them aware of it, yeah.
And then when Alex gets the answers to his questions, I will also share that out in a Friday packet with you guys as well.
Yeah, thank you. We use the program in University City as well. Will you talk to us about the playbook and how SSD is using it?
Yeah, so again, they all have access to the playbook, our teachers as well as our administrators. Many of them use those for specific categories, especially looking at our student surveys, the social emotional surveys. They can go into the playbook and pull specific research-based strategies to be using in their social skills groups, to be setting up rules, routines, classrooms to, utilize those strategies. Then at the higher level, many of our administrators would be looking at that playbook to see if there are certain strategies that maybe they want to have some more professional learning on with their staff. And then accessing it in that way.
So we can really, it's continuous improvement.
Absolutely. The great thing about the playbook too is they are constantly adding new things to it. And so it has grown so much since we've started using it. So, there's always new strategies and ideas on there for our staff.
Very helpful.
Yes, thank you. Right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you all. Now we will have Dr. Bolton now and we need a discussion regarding the caseload formula pilot.
All right, good evening. Dr. Molly Bolton, Chief of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability, and with me tonight, I have Alan Wheat, who is our Chief of Student Services. And we are going to be presenting on the finalization of our pilot with the caseload workload formula. So I'm going to see. Yeah, all right. The purpose of the presentation really is to report out the results. There is a report that also goes with this presentation that goes into a lot more detail that you've been provided with as well. So we're gonna kind of present the findings of our pilot and then kind of our next steps. So for those of you who are new especially, I just kind of want to go into what in the world are we talking about with caseload workload? So the purpose and rationale is we are looking at how to address staffing needs equitably across the district. This has been a focus of ours, as well as just moving beyond how many students a teacher has as that sole data source. We really want to look at some of those workload variables that are impacting our teacher workload and capacity, and then kind of developing that shared understanding of what is workload. So this work began in the spring of 2023 through negotiations with our bargaining unit for SDNEA. And we had specific issue statements 4 and 5 that we developed this caseload summit where we could take into consideration some of the other factors that factor into a teacher's workload. And so with that, you can see the list of names of the folks who supported that work in that summit. And out of that, we created some factors that we would like to consider for workload consideration by service delivery model, as well as by role. So with this pilot, we've been working on it since 2023, so we've been working on it a little while. We really wanted to focus on developing a system that was versatile in that if we saw changes in different factors, we would be able to add them. If we saw some factors that maybe weren't being as impactful, we could remove them. Also, we wanted to really see what were some of those key variables that led to the weight of a caseload. And then lastly, using this as a piece of data to support some of those staffing decisions. So we had 2 types of outcomes for this. The first being around different processes that we use, and then the last being around impact. So really looking at what are those components we want to consider, and then establishing thresholds of those. And we did that by role. So for example, we have related service providers that provide occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language pathologists, teachers. So looking at those variable roles, but also looking at their service delivery model. So are they more of servicing kids within the gen ed classroom? Are they pulling them out into small groups? Do they have more of a self-contained program where they have students most of the time? So considering all of those pieces. We really wanted to document the responsibilities and kind of the standards that we were seeing across the county, and then figure out a way to put this data into a visual platform that would be easy to use and consumable. And then also developing that training specific by role. And then the impact is really sharing and being transparent about how we're determining caseloads. And then also using that data then to more equitably distribute our resources, as well as looking at reducing those concerns across the district. So our pilot was a 1-year pilot. We looked at 3 districts and 1 SSD school. We chose these districts due to we wanted a variety of locations as well as sizes. So you can see we have a small, medium, and large district, and then we have one of our SSD schools. The included pieces in our pilot were administrators, teachers, related service providers, and speech language pathologists. We did exclude early childhood because the funding and staffing for early childhood is based on a grant, which is driven by DESE. The evaluation questions that we looked at as we did this pilot was, are we measuring the right things? What are those caseload thresholds that are most optimal? Were there some factors that we were looking at that were redundant or highly correlated? How burdensome was the process, especially for our administrators, on entering in factors that we don't have an automatic system to draw that information from? And then how was our training and our support materials? And then does our staff feel this is a valid measure? So some of our key findings. We did focus groups with the different service providers. And had some standardized questions that we shared with them. We also had them rate how they felt their caseload was in comparison to other teachers like them within their district, other teachers like them throughout the county. And so really just kind of comparing, to get that validity piece there. What we found is as the folks in the pilot looked at those components we had considered, they did feel like those were the components we should be measuring. Also, where our thresholds were. So if we said this caseload was manageable in this range, did our folks feel like whose caseloads were in those ranges, did they feel like their caseloads were manageable? If they were overloaded, did they validate that for us? We found we were pretty good on our thresholds with one exception, our self-contained. And so we have made some adjustments to that based on that feedback from those folks. We also found our administrators were spending most of their time cleaning data. Our data was very messy in that we might not have the correct data in our systems. So therefore, when it pulled, we were missing data or the data was incorrect.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. So for example, we may have a caseload that looked what we would consider underutilized. But what we found out was they didn't have all their IEPs locked. And so therefore those minutes were not, and those factors were not weighing into the caseload formula to give us the accurate measure for that caseload.
Thank you.
Perceived training, over 80% were satisfied with the training that we provided. And we did again see that what we had through the formula found that our folks felt that we were pretty in the same ballpark there. Really looking at future automation and exploration of some of the progress is one thing we'd really like to do. We didn't get to dig into that very much this year. They are still entering quite a few of the components manually just because we don't have it reported in the system that we can access. And then we also learned that you have to also, this is not the golden ticket, right? This is a piece of information because contextual factors also play a huge role. For example, if I am the only resource teacher at the high school level and I am underutilized, I'm not going to be able to move a lot. Like I can move potentially within the district some, but there's also geographical pieces. So there might be some contextual factors that we need to take into consideration. Another one would be an elementary school teacher who might look underutilized, but they have 5 grade levels to plan for. That's a contextual factor that we've really got to take into consideration as well. So yes, their caseload might look low, but when you consider they're planning for kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, then that increases their caseload or workload. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Al.
Thanks. So within this process of trying to reflect on capacity of employees and reflect on their workload, there's risk mitigation that we need to think about. on any given day in this district, we have between 50 and 150 students that are coming in or leaving or moving around in our district. And so one of the things that can cause the data to not reflect where it belongs is the delay it takes after a move. So that can be an inaccurate data set, which is very temporary in nature. That's one of the things, and I promised when we had our meeting with the union the other day that I would recognize the tremendous amount of time and effort that was put into this process, both from them in the summit, but also in our technical team, who developed a system which calculates every hour and updates the system as the work is happening. So this is our first effort to really have an in-process measure system to be able to reflect, but it still requires the judgment of our professionals in order to make meaning of what otherwise is objective data. So, which is the way for next? I always go the wrong way. That's your big button. Thanks. Okay, so now we're going to do an activity. You can just pass those around to Dr. Macklin. So for tonight's quick activity, we're going to explore a new way we're looking at special education staffing across districts. We're going to be reflecting on classroom teachers. So for the purpose of this activity, we're not looking at related service providers, but each one of these visuals can be looked at through multiple different layers. What we wanted to do was we're moving from reactive building by building decisions and conversations to data informed district level planning. So we're going to be reviewing real but redacted examples and reflect like a director might. So and in a moment, I'm gonna just give some context, and then in a moment, if you guys could come up and have a look at this data or on your activity sheets. So this is a visual representation of a district example. So take 30 seconds or so to look at these charts and then discuss at your table or in pairs. And we're interested in you guys reflecting on what does this data tell you? What questions might it inspire in you as you are reflecting? And so looking at this, we have the end count of the number of educators in each one of these schools named cleverly school 1, school 2, and so on. And then the same representation as a percentage of the total for those schools. So reflecting on this, and I'm colorblind, so I apologize, whatever sort of red light color that is, represents the number of staff who have a caseload, which is recognized by the system as potentially high or overloaded. Again, the context that needs to be reflected on is that which the director and or coordinator would be in possession of. A key example would be what might constitute an overwhelming caseload in one context might be quite manageable in another context. That's why the real intuitiveness of the system is being able to label different positions by as many of the assumptions we can include. Like we can apply certain assumptions to an elementary school that's serving students in a classroom focused on autism. And the system will return different data because of those contextual factors. So, and then, so reflecting on this example of a district that has 7 schools and some staff are overloaded and some staff are manageable or even low. And so reflecting on what the potential within that is to potentially say, can we create relief in these overloaded situations without overwhelming the other educators in those environments? And that's where the context that our system does not have, such as that's the only person providing low incident programming, meaning a classroom for autism in that school, So we don't have a remedy that someone can just pick up some of it. But reflecting on this, as a director, what kind of questions can I be reflecting on when looking at this district? Then next is another district context where you can see that there's quite a lot more that are in that higher range. And then reflecting on, is there potentially enough extra capacity in the low or within in order to create some adjustments to relieve this district setting? And so these other two charts are the actual factors that Molly was mentioning for a real educator and how the data is representing to create their label. In this case, it's a person who our system recognizes might be overloaded. And so it labels how much time is attributed to their situation. So the value is how many times or how many minutes those things occur. So for example, if you're case managing, in this case, 21 students, quite a bit. We expect that the case management independent of instruction is 20 minutes for each of those 21 students, which then carries a burden against their total available time. So the pluses and minuses throughout the system combined with the thresholds is where these badges of overloaded, underutilized, or within range come from. So if you can take just a couple of moments and reflect on this and think about the kinds of questions that you as a district leader, as a director, might reflect on when thinking about how to create a balanced workload for as many people as possible.
And if you'll go ahead and jot that down on your Post-it note, we're gonna have you go ahead and bring your Post-it notes up.
So. When I try to understand what is, one of the factors that the parties that have the most. I can sell the highest value eventually. High is the most important.
So the count, so like in this case. The total minutes, all of the IEPs that are for this significant.
8,000.
Which has an adjustment factor which reduces those minutes due to grouping. So because in a given class period, if you have 4 students, then you would cover. You know, if you've got 6 students in your classroom, you're covering 240 minutes of your case in that one.
So that's what the adjustment factor that's for. The adjustment factor, I mean, we're gonna adjust it by this factor, and that is your amount.
So.
So again, it's a starting number of 22 revenue.
So when I look at these factors, what am I supposed to make important to this?
This was to visualize how the factors interrelate to create these labels overload. So like, for example, if I know as the director or the coordinator that a person has the label high.
Okay, these are all numbers.
Those are.
Yes, so I meant to compare this to that.
Correct, that's just to reflect what it can look like for someone labeled high and what it can look like for someone labeled low.
Give me about 2 more minutes.
CM stamps.
Case manager. Yeah, for the case managers.
All of us, we're using it for everyone. Yeah, and that's why we do it. Is that takes away from the. Yes.
Might have actually worked for 15 students because of the other. So, do we have that thing? So, yes, we have that, that's actually organized by the state defense.
You don't mind going ahead and posting?
This is.
Posting their comments, observations.
Questions, observations, anything that arises for you, yes.
I can't say that to be a annual student, it's not a student. He's a single student, you're in a very stable place. You're in that stable place, one student.
On the India
This is.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, part of the community, and no the fact that we. Or at least it gets to be balanced and we all see. Yeah. Oh, contract. Yes. There's visualization that belongs to us, it's not just to staff. Yeah, this is very highlight.
So I think.
All right, I thank you guys for your feedback. Again, I will compile this data and share it back with you all, so you all know all the questions that were asked, and if we have some answers for them, we will provide them, as well as the comments. Things that you are considering as you looked at that. We hope that experience just kind of helped you see what it would be like for our administrators to kind of use this data to help them make some decisions.
Literally just a interview activity for an area coordinator.
Yeah, I use it as an interview activity, absolutely.
Really good. Performance evaluation.
There you go, there you go.
I want to thank our printers, presenters tonight.
I just have 2 more slides, I'm sorry, Dr. Mecklen, I'll go fast.
No, you're fine. I thought you were close.
No, my clicker isn't working, Mark. Thank you, just 2 more slides.
Oh.
All right, timelines and next steps. We are gonna continue our feedback cycle and refining those thresholds, as well as implement our system-wide rollout plan next year. And then have some of those specific trainings for the different areas, so that folks feel comfortable looking at and using this data. Our goal is really to make the data visible to all. Our tech team, as Alan said, has just been wonderful, and has really put in thousands of hours to develop this. But they are super excited about it like we are. We are working on a way for teachers to view their own caseloads with their components. And that's kind of a good self-check for them, because if they're feeling overloaded and they look and their caseload's on that lower side, they can say, hey, wait, what's missing here? You know, and that's where we can get some of those corrections, making sure that they have their IEPs locked down, making sure that they've assigned their goals and service minutes to the correct providers and those types of things. Next slide, please. Long-term vision. Establishing a sustainable system for that caseload management, being able to use this as a great strategy to measure the well-being as well as retention of our staff, and then building that foundation for smarter decisions for our staff, as we know those decisions are coming.
Dr. Wong, I just wanted to add, when you said like making sure, like if they look at it and they're like, I feel overwhelmed, but also it might not be that your data is incorrect. It might be like, I need to look at scheduling. I need to look at
Yes.
planning.
What do I need to do
So like,
differently?
how can I go to my AC or instructional coach and
Yes.
say like, give me the coaching and feedback that I
Absolutely.
need to make my day work in a meaningful way.
Right.
And effective.
And we do know sometimes I'm one of those people. I take on more than I need to and probably should sometimes. So if I'm feeling overloaded, is it really truly because of what my duties are, or because of those extra things that I have taken on? And that's where those conversations and coaching can really come into to help support that.
Thank
Do
you.
you find that I find when you measure something, it changes? And right, if I'm gonna measure something, that's, you know, I know when people first start diet, when they start writing down all the foods that they eat, all of a sudden they go, whoa, and all of a sudden
Right.
they lose weight. I'm wondering, do you think this would be a real great tool to help people manage time?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I think that's
I'm
one of the
wondering.
pieces.
They may not know how much they spend. I know
Exactly.
most people don't.
Right. Yeah. And so it could be very helpful in that aspect too, just to reflect on that.
The interviews we did, plus a lot of reflections over time, really revealed that data perspective doesn't drive the feelings of the workday. So it can help to guide towards opportunities, but it itself does not mean our people are working very, very hard for their entire day, even if their data might reflect underutilized. And so part of that is that coaching opportunity to see, how do we work through that to make sure that your job feels like you can accomplish it?
So what is the time frame to document the data? After each caseload?
So at the beginning of the year, we're clearing out the system this year, for administrators to go in and add some of the factors are pulled directly from our Phoenix or our ESI systems and are fed into here. We do have some factors that are manual, for example, plan time. We do know, according to our joint resolution, 250 minutes of plan time a week. Am I right on that? Yes. But we also know that some teachers have additional plan times because they may be at the high school level, they may be the special education department chair. So they get additional plan time for that. So those kinds of factors have to be, like the 250 can be automatic because we know all teachers get that. But the additional would have to be entered by a supervisor to do that. And also it's kind of a checks and balances. If your caseload is low, do you have all your IEPs locked down? Do you have everything assigned to the right folks? And if not, giving them access to jump in and correct those things, and then within an hour, that data will be updated so that we can make those decisions.
This is great work. You have teachers involved on your committees.
Yes, on the worker.
So the SDNEA is involved and so forth. So
Yes.
we have buy-in from teachers already. The second question I have is, will this be shared in your workshop coming up at the end of the month with partner districts, administrators and so?
As far at the Principals Institute?
Yes.
Actually, this is not one of the sessions on the Principals Institute. It is not. We have a lot of great sessions, and
Okay.
this is not one of them.
And we have to deploy this to our administrators.
First.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but eventually this may
Yes.
be something we want to share.
Oh, absolutely. It will be shared with our liaisons.
Right.
Yes.
Director Suda?
Yeah, thank you. This is such important work. Thank you for getting this. Is the intent to get this documented district-wide?
Yes. For next year, yes,
For next
it'll be
year.
ready, it'll be ready in August.
And are these based on actual?
We have taken some schools and put them together. So you cannot identify a district of here.
And is this similar to what you're finding? Are you finding this sort of disparity?
I found some comparables to the reason that we're instituting the writing the ship plan. We do have some disparate opportunities for our staff where their workday feels quite different to them. So there are parallels there.
This is a tool we can copyright mark and sell to other people.
Yes. I cannot say enough. I get really geeky when I start thinking about it. It is the closest thing that I've ever seen to in-process capacity measuring, which is really encompassing of more than just head counts, but also accounts for a lot of contextual factors that are very meaningful. You know, it really was surprising to me when we did our interviews, how many people said, wow, it sees that. And said,
And
yes,
thank you for considering that, because that is something that impacts my workload.
So because I'm not gonna name the district, but there is a regional district that I've told that you all are doing this work, and they were like, we can't work till they're done, and we want it, and if the rest of the state can get on board with a similar model, it would make all of our lives so much easier. So, yeah, package it up, sell it.
Love to do that. That would be amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That actually concludes the superintendent's report for this evening. I know that we have diligent training to take place. I do want to say thank you to all of our presentations tonight and the work that really went into them. You can tell that that it was tailored for this evening, so appreciate those pieces. I think also to the point that was made about the initial start of October 23. Sometimes it's very important to measure twice and cut once. So even though the length is there, ensuring that efficacy is there. So we appreciate this.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, we are transitioning to diligent community in a months-long process. The first live business meeting will be June 24th. And we have been putting everything in board docs and in diligent community parallel since April. One of the big things that is different is the informational packet in board docs is its own thing under a library, and diligent community is just another meeting. As of this Friday, we're gonna stop using board docs for the information to sort of force all of us to start using diligent. Dr. Macklin looked at it for about 10 minutes and said, oh, I'm converted. Director Suda had a phone call with me. She said, I barely need this. It's pretty intuitive, as did Fever. So everyone's kind of bringing it along at their own pace, which is just fine. If you haven't established your credentials, just contact me whenever it's convenient for you. If you have any trouble, I'll make sure that you're in there. We have not, although the public site is ready, we have not put that out yet. That will happen on the 15th, working with Chief Henry's team to do some social media communication. But basically making the district ready. For certain chiefs, it makes a whole lot of sense to develop workflows and to train their staff. They want to approve things within the system. For some, it's better for them to do it themselves. And yet others may touch diligent community once or twice a year. Why give them access? Why train them? They can still send it to me the way that they used to. So on our special meeting Saturday, we will conduct it through diligent. And then the 24th again will be the first live. I've already worked with technology to ensure they don't snafus. I would ask President Staten once we get to the action items on the 24th. You go slow. That first time, just so that we can make sure that that's all running. But every time you log in, this is the first place to go. Diligent has a whole bunch of different modules. We purchased community. I am not going to do an in-depth overview, but on the side here, you'll see all the features. If you hover it will tell you what it is in terms of settings. The scale is our policy book. Right now, they're also in parallel. We keep them all on our website. I'll have a downloadable PDF. But the entire policy book is there. So click there to look to review any policy under A through I. And then there's a document library. So every previous meeting will be housed there, as will your important board docs and important board information. That's all been ported over from board docs. This icon here is the public site. So just to give you a quick preview, it's again all ready to go. We just haven't sent it out, but the people can subscribe, they can get notified when meetings are posted. And again, they can see our policy book. And we'll run those in parallel with our current communications website for about 30 days, just in case people have feedback. But they can see all the upcoming meetings that are just shells in the recent meetings. So that's a quick overview of the public site. But when you go into board docs as board members, you will see both current meetings and upcoming meetings. And I'm just going to click on this pretend June 10th meeting very briefly. Because I don't know, maybe Director Sig, you want to jump in? Have you annotated yet on the side? Have you found that feature helpful? Okay, so you do have the ability to do that as board members. If you want to take notes instead of, handwritten notes, print something off, or on the side, you can do it right within Diligent. Only you see that. So when it's time for the meeting, you can just go right to your notes if you've got predetermined questions. That you want to see, but it I think is very intuitive. Everything will have a cover memo and then any attachments, presentation. So the flow of the meeting and the way that you access the information is very, very similar to one. So in the interest of time, I know that's not a real training. I just wanted to tell you some of the timelines that are upcoming. Get everybody sort of acculturated to beginning to get into Diligent such that by the 24th meeting, we are ready to roll them. But always available for one-on-ones to go through any questions. If you've got your Diligent invitation email, that was sent by me. I sent it twice. So that to your non-assistant.
I'm sure I do.
And so it's very simple. You use your SSD email as your username, and then you'll be prompted to create a password.
I did tonight's meeting on Diligent.
I saw it. Thank you. And there's in the initial email that I sent to the board, it does have a few like 8-minute videos that you can listen to, watch, and kind of gives you the highest level of review. So yeah. But that doesn't advocate my responsibility to train, so feel free to reach out. Any questions?
No, just a comment. I noticed, I'm not sure all the meetings are in the archive sheet. I don't see any 13, that we some meetings have not made it.
Oh, right. Are you talking very recent?
I am talking.
Yes. So because we're not live officially in Diligent, they're going to do one final migration to catch everything that they didn't catch in the initial while we're running things in parallel. That's why. Yep. Even though I've created them to run in parallel and I notified them, they're not on the site yet.
Okay.
Because that will be causing me scrape the secondary.
I have a question. Will Diligent be using SSO, Google SSO for long meetings? Or this?
Yes.
Thank you.
What's it?
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, I now move to adjourn.
So little time.
Their motion. Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Yes.
Or all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.